discussed that she's got some questions on, and I'm going to start by saying a little bit of stuff. I know you think this has been rushed. The water project has been something, and Andy will verify this with me. It's in a 20-year master plan. We're 21, 22 years into this 20-year master plan. This is no surprise that we've got to complete the upgrade at the water plant. It's been something that has been scheduled and the city's known about for 21 years now. And the health department has finally said, you've reached the capacity. Today, our plant's running, we're not in summer. Today, our plant's running 750,000 gallons a day right now. I mean, and we're nowhere near where we'll be for summer usage. Right. And last year, we run 125 days, what it roughly, at full capacity.
I don't know
it was way on up there in days, and that's what got the letter from the health department sent to us that said we had to do it. So, and another thing you were concerned about is we seem to be rushed on the deadline. We know what the water project's going to run. We know what the sewer project's going to run. Those right here is applications where Andy's done the work, and we know exactly what's going to do, and you wouldn't bid these jobs without having money ready to go for them. That's, the engineer gives you a price estimate, and I'll let him explain that a little bit more, and then you go from there. So both of those projects are done. Now then, the sewer project, if we don't get a grant to do both, because we get a grant, we can do both projects, or do a big part of the sewer project plus the water project if you get a grant. If you don't get a grant, we've still got to get the water project done now, and or it's going to be fully in the water rates because it's got to be done. And Andy can explain more about it may not have to be done and it won't be done in the next year. This thing's going to take a while to get.
Well, if we started today, it wouldn't be completed in the next year.
So, and the health department's already pretty much pushed out that we've got to get that project done. If we do it in the refinance, and I'm going to have to let you guys explain how the sales tax is going to apply to Act 605, because it is a debt. But there's other revenue coming in that's going to be applied to all of the bonds that are on this, not necessarily the rate. I'm going to need you to explain how that's going to work, because 605 is very confusing. Everybody's hearing about 605, and whatever the rate study does in Act 605, we're going to be stuck with. But if we have the $9 million, $5 million of old and $4 million of new in the sales tax to be paid back with that money, and we got the $230,000 roughly in that 1 cent for operation and maintenance, that won't, it's in the rate, but it's not, you have a way to pay for it. How do you want to word that? There's a way to pay for it that's not going to make the rate, it's not going to affect the rate, to where if we go and borrow, if we don't do this right now and we do the $4 million, it's going to be a big addition to the rate, because you got to pay that back in the water rate structure itself. So with those questions answered, let's go through and answer which one wants to take. You can take where we are with the health department, and then we can go down. We've got to get those questions cleared up so you're clear on what you're posting on your Facebook post. This and the reason for the time constraint that we're dealing with on these dates, the goal of this was to have the sales tax done by January 1 of next year. And we have to back into these dates, and the reason we're finding this date that the bid openings are going to be the day or two before. We have to have the meeting, the 7, so they can get all this stuff in place. We have no more time to get it in place and have it to where it'll work for next year. If we can throw our hands up and say, okay, we need some more time to think about it. We're going to be another year down the road. And I don't know how long the health department's going to be happy with us kicking this can down the road. We've kicked it down the road 20 years. I think we're at the end of the road on that. And I'd like to see if we get some of the the half-cent sales tax moved so we could have more than 2 policemen. But we'll go through all that because I know you're putting on your post out there to everybody, and we need to get it where it's clear. And if there's a question that we don't have tonight that's clearly answered for you, we need to answer it so we don't come back out, well, I didn't get my question answered. We've answered the questions the best we know how. Unfortunately for you, you haven't been here from when it started back. So some of that is questions that we assumed was already, everybody knew. You didn't, I understand. And maybe the people in Glenwood don't. But, well, they won't come to meetings and get involved, so.
Carrie went on that. Sorry, I should not.
But anyway, with that being said, I'm gonna let Andy go through the projects again. The sewer we're not wrote up on. We could do that a little bit at the time if we don't ever get a grant on it. And hopefully we wouldn't have to have a big rate increase. We got one section of town done. The one that was Mary Street and all the problems over there. The rural water come in and it's cambered. We paid them, what, $2,500 to camera for us? Huh? $4,000 to camera for us. But we went in and fixed it. We're getting all of that. Everything's on that pump station. We're getting fixed. So we've got a part of town fixed. We've made a big improvement from where we were. That's not replacing all the lines, and that truss pipe's going to have to be replaced someday. But right now we're okay with it. But Andy?
I think maybe a better way to approach this, I mean, you've heard what I'm about to say, which this will be the 4th time. Why don't we just start with questions?
Okay, that sounds good.
I mean,
I just have a list and they're just general and they probably could just be answered with a yes or no, or explain it.
And if it's something that doesn't apply to me, these gentlemen can chime in.
Okay. And you just answered one of them, kind of, but I want for clarity. Is the Glenwood water and sewer system an integrated system? Because if it's an integrated system, then the rate study is on the entire system, water and sewer. But is it
Yes.
an integrated system?
Yes.
So then they're both going to be subject to rate
Yes.
study. Okay.
Most towns, there's very few towns, Andy, is there, that won't apply to both. I don't know if a city's got water, a city's got sewer, they're going to be under. Both of them are going to have to fall under that rate.
What defines integrated?
The way I look at it is whether they're audited as one.
Okay.
Yeah, whether the audit covers the water and sewer system, or there are very few that have a separate sewer, separate water.
Okay. Separate companies.
Well, separate.
Entities.
Like the audited financial statements would just be of the water side, and then you'd have separate financial statements of the sewer side.
Most of mine are that way.
Yes.
They're integrated.
Okay.
So I didn't know what the distinction was.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the rate study that, when I read the documents that was sent to me by the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, they weren't very clear as to the definition of integrated. And is that a positive or negative? I'm just asking. Is that, because you said the sewer is
The sewer, we don't
better off than
have.
the water, and that's my words.
The sewer right now, our problem with sewer, ADQ has not got us written up. The health department has us written up on water. We have to get, there's not an option anymore. And I'm not saying that sometime in the next 20 years, ADQ with their infiltration is not going to come in there and say, now's the time to get it done. That's not the case today. We know we have a problem and we're trying to get it addressed. If the grants were to come through, we could do it. I don't know, we can't wait to see, we can wait long enough for this grant cycle that we've got grant applications in for to tell if we're going to get funded in a grant. But I don't think we can wait 4 or 5 years with the health department.
Usually cities' projects, at least of this magnitude, are driven by inspection reports, either from the DEQ or from the health department. The health department comes every 2 or 3 years to do sanitary surveys. Is it
3 to 5?
Okay, 3 to 5 years.
We're closer than that.
So the sanitary survey that the health department provides is a complete assessment of the system. And the result of that is they'll have minor deficiencies and significant deficiencies. This, as far as capacity, is considered a significant deficiency because you've exceeded, and I'll give you a copy of this later if you don't have it. And I've read portions of it before. When a city exceeds 80% of their capacity for a certain number of days, that prompts this letter saying you need to look at upgrading. So the difference between the water project and the sewer project is the ADEQ, who oversees wastewater, hasn't mandated improvements as a result of their inspections. The health department has on the water side. So the need, we know the need is there on the wastewater side because after a rain, the flow increases at the wastewater plant, and it shouldn't. So we know the need is there, but as long as the wastewater plant has capacity to treat, even though it's rainwater, it doesn't raise the red flag with DEQ. So the need is on both sides, but the immediate need, because of inspection reports, is on the water side.
And do you think that you applied, or we applied for grants on the water and the sewer side? Are they independent of each other? Because I would sure rather, it sounds like you'd rather the water than the sewer if you had to choose. You want both.
It's two separate applications looked at independently.
Okay.
And from our world, we as an integrated system, I can tell you one positive that you can get from that is that when we look at revenue sources that are being pledged, right now we're talking about a sales and use tax revenue that coming off of that. When we looking at a water and sewer system as a whole, you can pledge your entire water and sewer revenues towards a borrowing. So for instance, if you had more water revenue coming in than you do sewer revenue, but you got a sewer project, you could still pledge those revenues as an integrated system. So, sometimes we see, I do work with some cities who have it broken out where you might have wastewater as one line item. Well, they have to finance any of their projects based on that revenue source if they're pledging that towards the project. So having an integrated system helps, and again, on the water and sewer revenue side, which isn't necessarily applicable to what we're talking about here, but from a 605 perspective, it's something to be mindful of.
Okay. Well, that's a positive. Mm-hmm. That can go either way. So, with 605 in there, they have the factors that are included in the rate study, financing expenses, including but not limited to debt service. And this is a debt service, but the bond would be a debt.
Right. So this is one I can cover. It's Act 605 is not clear on this. I mean, you know that from reading it. So, and this is going to be something that, Mayor, once all this goes through, I do want to talk to your rate consultant once they come on board. Usually, a sales tax bond issue is not included as a debt of the water and sewer system. Why? Because no water and sewer revenues are tied up in it. Water and sewer revenues can never be used to pay debt service on that. If the auditor, and I'd be happy to talk to your auditor about this too.
Rural water is going to do cities.
Okay.
And he said as long as Brenda, the meeting we had with him, he said if it's, and I think Sarah was saying that the way y'all wrote the bond issue, it'll be very clear that the debt service on the money we've got on the bonds will be paid for totally by the revenue from the sales tax.
Correct.
And that clears that. It is debt service, but you've got a revenue of income that's not part of your, and he was in the meeting we had with him back in November.
I think it was in November.
It was while Bridget was mayor and I was just helping get these meetings set up. He said, if it's specific, like y'all are going to make it be, then it's debt service, but you have other income to cover the debt, and it will count.
It's not necessarily water and sewer debt service, it's just debt that we owe the city, right?
Right, yes.
It's water and sewer debt, but we have a sales tax that's paying for it. And rural water is who you would need the guy at rural water will be the one that does our final audit on that, on 605. But And Sarah was saying something the other day, you may clarify that. She said the way our issues are on our bonds right now, she didn't feel like he would give us full credit because it's not got them tied down like y'all can make them be tied down with the new ordinances.
Right. So if Act 605, if the rate analyst says no, we need to count the debt service on the new sales tax bond issues for Act 605. In that event, the entirety of the sales tax revenues would go into the revenue side of that equation as non-rate revenues. So let's just, I'm going to prove out with the math how it doesn't matter either way. Let's say you have debt service of, let's say you have $750,000 worth of sales tax collections. I'm making numbers up. $500,000 worth of debt service in a year. Your expense side goes up by $500,000, but your non-rate revenue side goes up by $750,000. The net effect of that is that you have $250,000 worth of non-rate revenue in the equation from the excess of the sales tax that doesn't pay debt service that's available for use by the water and sewer system, okay? If the bonds are excluded from the Act 605 expense side, you will not be able to add in the full $750,000 of sales tax collections on the non-rate revenue side. Instead, you would add in the $250,000 difference between the sales tax collections and the debt service cost. You net out at the same place additional $250,000 worth of non-rate revenue. There is no case, there is no logical case, and this is where we would have to talk to the rate analyst, where you would count the entirety of the debt service but then not count the entirety of the sales tax. That doesn't match the economic realities of what we're doing here. So either way you shake it, the net effect is the same. The amount of sales tax collections that come in that aren't used to pay the bond issue are going to be counted as a non-rate revenue for purposes of your rate study.
So that difference is, and that's part of the study.
Yes, yes,
the
yeah.
non-rate.
Yeah, it's the non-rate revenue line in the study. That would be the sales tax collections that aren't used to pay debt service.
Okay. Well, that's not very clear at all.
In Act 605?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, keep in mind, no rate studies have been done yet. So I would imagine that once they get in, they being the state, gets in and starts getting some of these rate studies back, they're going to change the rules up a little bit just because, you know, this is all academic at this point. No one's actually done one of these.
That doesn't make you nervous that we're kind of being like trial and error pretty much? Because what if it's interpreted a different way?
It can't be interpreted a different way. It's still income.
Yeah, I don't see a logical argument of how it could be interpreted a different way. And I think that the state, I mean, I do think that they're reasonable and they want this to be used as the tool that is intended to be. So I really don't think that that is much of a risk. I'm not going to say it's no risk, but I think you'd have to have several levels of unreasonableness in order for that to.
The gentleman from Rural Water I'm saying November, I think that's when the meeting was, we'd have to go back and pull the minutes on it. He said, I have no problem in your sales tax applying 100% to your income side. He said if it's there and it's dedicated to that, and right now Sarah says the way it's worded, we're not getting full credit for it. Some reason, because I don't understand. She looked at it, studied it, and she said we would get more clarity with the new ordinance than we have today.
Yes.
And that will make it much easier for the 605 audit to understand. Sarah, but the gentleman from Rural Water told us the non-revenue does count 100% income, as long as you can prove that that's where that money has to be spent, and that's what we're going to do with this very clearly.
Yes.
We're waiting on the next one.
Okay. So the so the way that it's written in the ordinance or proposed ordinance, that would it would provide that clarity. So would the auditors look back at that ordinance? I mean, that's going to be a factor in it, right? That's what you're saying.
They would really look at the bond ordinance that would be adopted after the bonds are issued. That would be the governing document that they would look at. And of course, the draft of the bond ordinance will look at, what was included in the ballot and what was done in the election ordinance.
Okay. And it's going to be split out, right? Sewer, water? Or is it just
No. It would be, you'd have, so on the 1% tax, you'd have, it will be used to pay debt service on the bonds, and then the remainder would go to the water and sewer system.
But that debt service is water and sewer combined?
Well, the debt service is, it depends. If the water project is the only project on the ballot, and so the tax will apply to that new money water project, it will also apply to the refinancing of the old sales tax debt.
Which has water and sewer projects both in them.
Right. But I'm sorry, I don't really follow your...
So I think too, like, I'm pretty simple, so stay with me when I say this, but like in terms of, you have to kind of just think about it from the revenue source of things. Okay, we're talking about water and sewer projects, but at the end of the day, we're talking about the revenue source being the sales tax monies. And what happens under the current law, and the lawyers can correct me, but what happens is the way we're intending to set this up is that part of that 1 cent tax is going to go to the projects that we're proposing to do. Whatever's left over after the debt service payment will flow back to the water and sewer system. That sales tax monies will flow back, and then those monies can be used as like towards that rate study 605 piece. Basically, that can be accounted. So you might do the water and sewer revenues only, and you come up with, you have revenues of whatever, $100,000, but now we're going to tack another $300,000 of sales and use tax revenues on top, because that's what the voters have voted and allow us to do. And what don't know, because it hasn't been done yet, is whether or not, how that will actually shake out. Like, what will the state or the rate consultant see, and will they see it? We're assuming they're going to see $400,000 of revenue going to the water and sewer system, which is a combination of sales and use tax monies and water and sewer revenues together. Whereas if they don't see it that way, how else would they see it? Well, maybe they would see, and there's the question of the debt piece, which you were talking about earlier, and how does that get taken into account? But I think from your perspective and from the financing perspective, we're looking at it just from that revenue flow. How does that money flow in? And so in theory, what you've seen in the presentation is based on current numbers. After we make a debt service payment of approximately $570,000, another $300,000 is available, which gives our investors comfort that they know there's a cushion there, but any monies that are above that are going to flow back to the water and sewer system as sales and use tax monies. Does that make sense in terms of how I'm trying to say it?
Let me ask a question here that I want to make sure I'm clear on. In the proposal you're doing on page 7 of the book, you showed the payment's going to be $560,000, roughly $894 a month. And last year we collected $870 in income. We're assuming that never goes up.
Correct.
It went up. We had a big increase. We had $100,000 on the cent and a half this month. So
correct.
That leaves $309,000 to go into O&M, and that will also see if I'm understanding this right, because it's something I'm not clear on. $309,000 going into O&M, that will help offset rate study, because that does give you O&M money to go with your rate. And that $309,000 won't have to be put in a depreciation account. Well, we still have to have a depreciation account, but that's $309,000 of maintenance money that can come out of a rate, not come out of a rate, but it will go get that'll go against, it'll help buy the rate down
Right.
by that $309,000.
The ratios would be where they
Well, in my mind,
the ratios would be where they need to be.
Yeah.
and in my mind, it goes to what you've said in the past, Mayor, is that it prevents you from having to do an immediate rate increase to service these projects because the revenues are coming off the sales tax monies. And these monies here, because they're sales tax monies, are going to flow back into the system to offset some of those costs. So
If we don't do this, if we leave the sales tax 1.5 cents, just like it is today, we don't get to vote to change, we'll have to borrow $4 million to do this water project, and that will go straight to water rate increase.
And what would an increase look like for how many
How many
customers do we
customers?
have?
832, or do we have more than that?
We've got about
How many
customers.
water
How many customers do we have in Glenwood?
17.
About 1,700.
1,700.
We have
Okay.
1,700.
They're all active, it's a lot of rental property, but actually.
So 1,700 meters, so $4 million would be divided
By 1,700 meters, basically.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
over
because
over
Over a certain
several
amount of
years.
time.
Well,
if you did this project, for instance, Norman is on our cost of water production is all they pay for in their rate because they're paying their note payment on the money the city has borrowed on their note. But if we do a $4 million improvement, that's an increased cost of water production. Norman will pay ever how much increase of cost of water production, because that $4 million, Randy, will go into the cost of water production, correct?
Yes.
Because it's an improvement to the water plant itself. It's not distribution.
Right.
So Norman and North Pike County will both share
Some of it.
some of that cost. And I don't know what that number is going to be today, but they would both share in that. That's not just the city residents going to share in that. North Pike County and Norman will have to share in that cost because the cost of production of water is going up by $4 million if you don't get it done in the sales tax.
The way you're looking at that is a worst case scenario. That's assuming that there is no buffer, if you will, built into the existing rate structure. If you were spending every dollar that you had as income, yes, that would be the way to look at it. I don't think that's the case because there's revenue available. But that line of thinking is
So it technically couldn't be 4 million, might not be 4 million, it may be 2 million or whatever that's going to come out of people's pockets, right?
likely it would be something less than that, but that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Now, this water project, what does that $4 million, I know we've talked about it before, but what does that improve to the treatment plant, or not to the treatment, but to the water treatment plant? What does that do? What is that?
It's
New clarifiers, new
filters, clarification.
So will that increase the
Taxes
quality
to-
of water?
It
Would it
increases the volume of water.
Okay, what about quality? Would
We'd
it,
make an excellent water.
Quality would be consistent with what you have now. It allows you to produce more water.
okay.
So when
It's not maintenance items. It's not replacing pumps.
It's
It's
more
an
water.
increase in capacity for treatment.
We're going from a 1.2 million gallon a day plant to a 2 million gallon a day plant.
Right.
And with the re-rate of the filters, we may actually bump the plant could bump a little higher than that, because I think we've passed the re-rate of the filters.
I know our water is
it's safe
safe
to drink,
and
yeah.
healthy and all that stuff. I know that we get complaints about
The color and the smell.
the taste of it or whatever. Is there something? And it has to do with the water level, and I don't know what it all has to do with, but I do know that at least twice a year the water does have a funny smell. It has an off-putting smell.
We have already addressed that problem this year early.
Okay.
Our plant operator, we knew that was a problem 4 years ago when we took care of it. Didn't have a problem with it. The new plant operator did not know. We've
Right,
already,
'cause
we're
I've
already
already-
putting activated charcoal in right now to handle this, and that problem should not occur.
I've only noticed the last couple of years.
That's,
And-
it may not, it's got to blow up on.
But I've
them.
only been here for 7, so I don't know.
Right, yeah.
But I know that-
activated charcoal is a mechanism to control taste and odor. Taste and odor problems are common.
Yeah.
there's
Yeah, it
nothing.
doesn't happen just to Glenwood's water.
No, and I understand. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to build water treatment plants. I
It's
mean,
a
I
huge
understand
outgoing.
there's a
Yeah.
whole bunch to it. I guess what I'm saying is from what we hear,
Right.
does this $4 million at all help maybe? Definitely helps
But
the
you're already
outflow of it.
addressing that as what?
The
Right.
problem that you had on the odor or the taste is something that Glenwood already knew how to handle and didn't
Just
handle
didn't do it.
properly.
Okay.
It's I've talked with Howard already, we're already treating for it right now, and it's not a problem, but you gotta get ahead of it. You can't get it. If you get the odor problem,
Yeah.
it's there till it works through the system.
Right.
You gotta be ahead of that, and we're already treating for it right now, and we're way early on treating, but we're already doing that, and that should not get away from Howard right now, because Howard now knows to look for it, and he knows what to do, and he was told to buy the chemical, the charcoal. He's putting that in, so that odor problem that we had for 2 years should not be an issue. We know what to do to handle it, and we've got a good water plant operator, and I do not think that will be an issue this year. He didn't know to look for it.
And again, taste and odor problems are a nuisance.
Right.
Right.
Right, but people.
I know the perception.
They equate it with
that's exactly right.
not being healthy for you. I mean, we're used to drinking bottled water because that's how we did it in Phoenix, because there's high levels of chlorine.
Which
you
also
know,
is necessary.
Which also is necessary, and it doesn't taste good. So that's just what we do. But you know, it's
Right.
You can leave the plant at, 3 parts per million? What's legal? And we're leaving it about a 0.8 because we've got the quality water, we've got the health departments let us come way down.
Yeah.
We used to have to leave at 1.5.
Yep.
But the water quality is so good, the health department's got us down to 0.8. I'd have to get with Howard to make sure, but I think we're down to 0.8 parts per million leaving the plant.
And there's huge benefit to leaving the plant with as low chlorine level as possible. You don't want to have to use the chlorine, but also the more chlorine that's in the system, the more there are reactions that cause other problems.
Right.
Yeah.
Pipes and everything else.
Disinfection byproducts.
And that's just a common thing that happens in the summertime with the heat. But I can tell you this too, the Glenwood uses chlorine gas, which is really the best way to go and everything. But if you have a system that uses chloramines, is that how you pronounce that?
Chloramines.
Chloramines, okay. That's the stuff that you get where you can smell it when you walk in the house. So, I mean, Glenwood's using the best disinfectant system, you know, for the water and the taste. Is, you know, it's, I mean, it's...
Bottom line, that the improvements that are planned are consistent with the treatment process that's there now, and it does include, you know, activated charcoal for taste and odor. We just need more volume
well,
from
and I
the
think
plant.
we need to, and we need to try to change the perception of people that it, just because it has that smell and taste doesn't necessarily mean that it's not good.
One point I'd like to make is just to answer, I don't know if this is a question or not, but, you know, people keep talking about the need for the water plant. So I'm mostly wastewater. And wastewater volume is based on weather. Okay, it's if it rains, we have a lot more volume. If it doesn't rain, we don't have volume. But the water is based on usage and demand. And so the more, that's never going to go away. It's just going to increase and increase and increase. And so that's one reason why, you know, if anyone questions about the water plant, it doesn't go up and down like wastewater
Doesn't
does.
fluctuate with the weather.
Yeah, that's
Unless it's dry.
one reason why ADQ is not staying on wastewater plants is because, you know, we may bust 1 month out of 12 or 1 month out of two years, you know, on our capacity. But Glenwood has been over capacity for, you know, the water treatment.
Are there any concerns that the projects that are out there are major development projects, which a 605 means a project that exceeds 20% of gross revenues as a provider?
That was actually...
Are there any concerns that they would do the rate study sooner than what they could do it, like 2026? If there's a major development project, it looks like it could come sooner.
Right. Yeah, the major development project language got taken out of Act 605 this legislative session.
Okay, well, they sent me, I got this from agriculture.
Yeah, and it hasn't been posted on there yet because I don't think technically it hasn't gone into effect yet. I don't know the exact date, but legislation goes into effect 60 days after the session technically adjourns, and they've temporarily adjourned, but the General Assembly is going to go back into session, formally adjourn. Usually that happens at the very end of, it might happen this week, it might happen next week. That legislation will be in effect 60 days from that date. So when the bond issue is done, the major development project language is no longer going to be in the Act 605 implementing legislation.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
I mean, that's good because it is considered.
Well, all the cities by 2026 are still going to get,
Right.
you're going to get compliance with it no matter what, even under the new issue of the law.
That's true.
It kicked the can down to 2026 because everybody couldn't get there. Now, rural water also told us, Brenda, back in in the November meeting, they took our information and was going to try to give us a preliminary draft to look at that we wouldn't be our one that was an enforcing one, but he was going to look at it and try to give us so we'd know what our rates are going to look like. Mm-hmm. And he was going to try to get us one to have ahead of the real one. And he has not got that done yet because he's having to get their cities that's having to get theirs done right now. 2026 is when we got the can kicked down to, but he was still going to try to get Glenwood a rate to look at so we'd know where we are. So we may get one done that doesn't have to be enforced yet, but would let us know where we are, which would be good.
Yeah, would that be available to the public? I mean,
it will be if you get it.
I mean, preferably, that would be nice to get that before the citizens would go to them.
I doubt you get that done because he's got so much stuff going right now, and they just took on a project with Batesville last week. Batesville got written up on sewer, and they got to go camera. So all of his crews just got pulled off all the jobs. They're fixing to go camera all of Batesville in the next, because they got an administrative order that the mayor before them didn't get anything done, and now the new mayor got his letter served and with some threats hanging to it. So Rural Water and some other companies are going in to help. They've got the camera 100% of Batesville. Mm. So,
but there's a limited list. Well, there's an approved list of providers, and it's limited at best.
Oh yeah, no, I have a copy of it. I have a copy of providers.
But Rural Water is going to do ours, and it's no charge. Okay. And a lot of the rate study providers are billing pretty hefty for that. But Rural Water agreed to take Glenwood on. And there'll be no charge for that rate study for Glenwood.
I mean, from my perspective, they're just not, I mean, there's just so many ifs with this to ask the citizens to go and vote for something. We don't even have an indication of what it's going to do with the rate study. We don't have a preliminary draft budget to see where everything's going to go in that general fund. There's just a lot of unknowns, and that is what we're asking the citizens to vote. We're asking them to go in the booth and vote blind, pretty much. I mean,
no, you're really not, because if we do the sales tax addition or extension and do it in there, you're taking the $4 million out of the increase in rate. That's a given. Right, guys?
That's the way I see it.
It's either going to, if it is counted in your rate study, the entirety of the sales tax collection, the 1% sales tax collection will also be counted. So one or the other will be true. It'll all be excluded except for the remainder, the excess sales tax collections, or it'll all be included. And that's something that with the rate study, they could do it either way. It's going to depend on what your audit looks like. Sometimes your auditors will include sales tax bonds in the water and sewer audit, even though water and sewer revenues, because it's a water and sewer project.
Right.
So but the net effect will be the same either way.
But the one thing for sure, if we don't vote on the sales tax now and get behind it, the one thing that will be guaranteed is the $4 million will be added on. It doesn't, the cent and a half sales tax is going to stay on. Because if you don't change it, it's staying, it's not going away. Because we've got bond issues to cover for it, and until you pay those off 34 years from now on part of them, that sales tax is not going away. So the only option the city's got at that point in time, if we talk the people out of this tax right now, or re-voting on this tax right now, okay, we vote it down. That's fine. The 1.5 cent sales tax still stays on.
Plus a $4 million.
Plus a $4 million increase in rates to everybody because we didn't redo our bond issues. You go borrow money for a house and you redo your notes at the bank. Everybody does. This is the way America operates. This isn't something new. You go borrow money to do an addition to a house. You redo your note at the bank on your house. That's all the city's asking here is we can get revenue to do something that will have a payment that will make its payment. And yes, it is for 40 years. But you're out there 34 years anyway, or for 34 more years anyway on part of this tax. So, or let's talk them into not voting for it. If you talk them into not voting for it, we will put, or we'll be found in physical distress. And if we're in physical distress, the health department take it over, and whoever takes the system over is going to do the work, and you're going to pay. There's an easy way to do this, or there's a rough way to do it. And the health department may kick this can down the road for a year or two, but they're not going to kick this. It's been in your 20-year master plan. When the 20-year master plan was done to get out from under administrative orders 22 years ago. This is something that was known was going to have to be done. This isn't something that's emergency jumped up on us. It's been there. It's been in the rate study. If you want to read the book, I got a book in there that was done 22 years ago now. The city's got a copy of it up here. I got my councilman's copy at the store. You're welcome to look at it. It tells you we had so many years to get everything done. We've done everything in that master plan, but this right here. Now we've got a couple of pumps up there. One of our raw water pumps that brings water in from the river has not been replaced yet because it hadn't quit running, and the city was not going to replace that until it quit. And we've got our pumps from the pond into the plant. We're supposed to be replaced, and under the last administration, one of those went out and we replaced it with a 1 million gallon a day pump. So we're still both pumps short there, but one of those is probably, it's at the end of its life cycle. It'll be repaired and maintenance, and it'll be upgraded to a 2 million gallon a day pump. And that's the only things other than this that we like in the 20-year master plan. And I don't know what we're asking the voters here to do that we can't explain. That's what me and you need to get an understanding of what we're hiding from the voters, why we're rushing the voters. Andy, is there a rush on any of this? I mean,
the letter was August of 22. I don't see there's a rush. We immediately followed up with the application because we knew the grant opportunity was there. I don't see a rush.
But if we don't do this by the 17th, she doesn't have time
To get on the ballot, right?
to do anything with the ballot, and then we don't get funded for this year. I mean, that's where your rush would be.
well, if you're going to do anything with the half, there's two issues looking here. You're talking about possibly taking, for instance, if we, on the half-cent tax, because we're talking two things here. The 1 cent's already dedicated to water and sewer. they're not looking at anything. The half cent goes to streets. We have some extra income there, and I think if you did a quarter of a cent still specific for streets of the half cent, that last year brought in $217,000. We were bringing in 2018, that brought in $250,000. You're real close, and you can't break these percentages down any more.
Right, then a quarter.
Well, then an eighth. You could break it down another eighth.
But you're not going to get close to that 250.
The 217 gets very close to the 250, and then that gives you, I had Brenda work the numbers up. The city budget, we're funding nothing in the fire department right now. Right. The money has gone away from that, and we're getting money in street fund that we used to not get, but they took our general revenue fund away. I think you need to still leave a quarter of a cent of it where the council can't touch it. It's got to stay in streets, and y'all could do that in the ordinance. And we're 200, and then you could still word in the quarter of a cent that you would have to address street, and the council would have to put in $37,000 to be equal to what that was 3 years ago, to what the voters voted to put in streets. And we're getting money in streets that we don't. Is the people of Glenwood happy with 2 police officers? If you are, then I'd say vote against redoing this sales tax, and let's not hire a 3rd police officer.
What about all the other things?
All the other stuff. And the money's, we're not talking about an increase in sales tax, but if we don't redo this, next year in the budget, we're going to fund 0 for the fire department, 0, and we're going to have the money in the budget to support 2 police officers, and that's all the money that's there. So if we want to not do anything, then y'all need to tell us how you're going to get some more police officers, because a budget general fund, it won't support it. There's nothing you can, I'll give you the budget, and y'all can take the budget home and tear it apart. We've done it. Billy T had a real fortunate time when he was here, because the city got over $1 million of COVID money in general fund. And they had a lot of money to spend that's not there anymore, that wasn't there for the council before that. But the COVID money put a rush of money into all the city council's money in the general fund, and they got to do some things. You know, we got to hire police officers out of that money. It's not in the budget this year because the COVID money's gone. We've got $250,000 left in the COVID money that we had to spend on city improvements, and we're going to do First Street with that. Andy's got that project out for bid right now. The council's voted to do that. We're going to get First Street water fixed with that money that was there. And that's all of that money that there is left. So if we sit here and talk to people and not doing this, then somebody's got to tell me how you want to do any, I guess we're happy with 2 police officers, and that's all we got working. And the county's helping. But the county's only got 7 officers for the whole county. So you can't expect them to send 2 officers up here full time when they've got all of Pike County to cover.
It's not just about police officers, though.
It's
money
not just,
in the general fund is for so many other things, and we keep talking about police officers, but it's for, you know, the fire department, animal control, it's for people's paychecks, it's for parks and recs, it's for, you know, so many things that have to happen within a city. And if we don't do it, none of it gets done. You know, so it's not just police officers, and we need to kind of just go away from saying that one specific thing. It is necessary. We do need more, absolutely. But we need a lot more things, and it has to happen in the general fund.
Right, because water and sewer money, street money, cannot be spent
It can't,
on general
and
fund
it's
things.
there, and we're getting it.
But your whole city's pretty much ran off of
General fund.
funds.
Yeah, everything but streets, water, and sewer.
Right.
Let me ask a question, Mr. Attorney. If we put on the other half cent, we left a quarter cent specifically for streets, because we got a half cent specifically for streets, and I'm trying to figure out a way to be real close to matching what the money was in 18 to that number. because after 18, the reason the city's getting more sales tax revenue in is everybody that's getting Amazon and all that stuff's now having to pay sales tax. That's why our sales tax has jumped in both street and water and sewer and everywhere else. But we wouldn't be cutting the city short. We'd cut them $37,000 short, but we're getting $70,000 a year, Brenda, in state turnback money that we weren't getting 5 years ago.
And then about every 3 years we get a grant?
For $300,000. And we've got another one of those applied for. If you go out and look right now at streets being paid, that's grant money that we're paving streets today with. But then the other $0.25 would be worded like Sarah was talking about with all the other categories. Streets were in that, right? Read how she had that wrote for.
Let's see. I don't have the version that she had. I'm not sure what version she read from.
It was the 0.5% though, right?
But it would be a half cent. But
Yeah.
if you to keep the city calm,
Yeah.
let's leave a $0.25 in street. And that income's, but then in your income there, you would have to say street would still be a thing that the council considered with the other $0.25, because she was saying you could name all the things you wanted to cover
In that half a cent.
in that $0.5 would be covered in the $0.25 if you did that. Streets would still need to be there because it would be
Right.
$37,000 short, but you're getting $171,000 more than you were, so
But do we use $250,000 a year on streets every year? Do we use that?
yes.
Every year?
Absolutely.
That's
why Austin did it.
The reason we've got $2 million in street fund right now is for the last 4 years we've done no maintenance.
But if
We've
that
done no
whole,
paving.
if that whole half a cent, now this is just a question, but if that whole half a cent, because another 1% is water stuff, right? If that whole half a cent, if it did go into general fund and we labeled streets and first responders or whatever, we labeled all that stuff, it had to be addressed by the council. If there's anything over, it's gonna still roll into general fund, right? So as your things show right here, 2022 tax collections, 870, so 0.5% of that is 435,000. Obviously, we have to make a payment on that. If that payment is 400,000, but we bring in 500,000,
No.
the extra 100,000 will still stay with that half, won't it?
The 435 is the half cent. The
That's what I'm saying.
870 is.
But I'm
going to
saying
water
there's
and
gonna be a
sewer.
payment on that,
There's no payment on the 435.
on the half cent?
No, there's no debt
Right.
service.
So
payment.
it's
So it's
the-
only on the 1 cent?
Yes.
So that whole 435, that half cent is gonna go
that's the
where the
that's,
voters,
yeah,
Right.
that's the way it's going to be designed. Now,
Okay.
on the ballot and for the bond issue, it's very important so everybody understands that that half-cent tax will be pledged to debt service to the extent that it is necessary. So if there is, for whatever reason, a massive drop in sales tax collections, that 1% tax cannot cover debt service payments. That half-cent tax is also going to be pledged. Now, we're talking about a catastrophic situation if that did happen, and it's designed to not be, but that's something the investors will expect to have, is the additional pledge of that tax.
so if that half a cent was going, say, general fund, and we had this catastrophic event, then that money's gonna come out of that fund to
But
pay.
yeah, it'll never make it to the general fund.
Okay,
So it
so to
would
go
be,
hit there first.
it would, yeah, the trustee bank for the bond issue would hold that money back before it ever came to the city. Now, lacking that, I just wanted to point that out, but lacking that, the way that it is drafted on the version that I have in front of me, and this is what Sarah sent out the other day, it's for street purposes and general municipal purposes. Now, there's not a breakout saying that half of it will go to street, the other
Right.
half will go to general
And
municipal.
that would allow the council members to figure that out in their budget.
Yes, yes.
That's the
What it
general
does,
fund.
what you do get in this, the way that it's worded, is at least some of it has to go to streets.
Right.
Some of it has to go to general municipal.
They'll have to make that
But-
determination when they're doing their budget, if they want
Yes.
to put 280,000 instead of the 250. and then they get less in, the rest of it get less in the general fund.
Yeah. And now we could also word it to where 50% goes to street purposes and 50% after the payment of any required debt service, 50 goes to street, 50 goes to general municipal. I always advise people the more flexibility the better, but that's a political question that's not really my role to answer.
I guess that's what, like, for me, I'm fairly frustrated about the whole thing, you know. I've never been part of city government, I've never been part of any of this stuff. There's no participation whatsoever, you know, there's nothing, you know. We're doing nothing but trying to better the city. You know, I do have a business in city limits. Obviously, I want it to succeed. I want the city to succeed. You know, I wouldn't be involved in a foster care program. I wouldn't be involved in my church as much. I wouldn't be involved in the Chamber of Commerce, you know, the city. I mean, there's so much stuff that we are trying to divide ourselves into to try to help out this city, and people feel like we're trying to take advantage of them. I make $256 a month for this position right here. That doesn't pay for the gas it takes me to run around this town. It truly doesn't. It's a volunteer position.
So Kerry doesn't get a penny, the councilman.
Kerry doesn't get a penny. People think that somebody's taking, I don't know. I have access to all the money, right? I've never seen anybody stealing money. I don't know where the stealing the money is. I don't know where any of this goes. You know, for them not to have any sense of trust in us. I know that none of us ran and were voted in. They were all appointed. Nobody else is stepping up. Nobody else is stepping up in here to try to help out. You know, for some reason they think that we want to take this money. All I want to do is better the city. I want that 0.5% to go into so we can get first responders, so we can get Parks and Rec, so we can get animal control. I don't know what the thing is. I don't know what the whole confusion about this whole thing is. I really truly don't. But that's my on the record statement.
I don't understand why people don't want what's better for Glenwood.
I don't either.
You know, why do other cities, when you travel, look so cute and nice and things are, you know, here and there, and you've got planters or you've got signs. And I know that sounds...
And we're trying to do that, honestly.
I know that sounds petty.
But we're doing that right now. But guess who's doing that? The Chamber of Commerce, not the city, because we have no money.
Right. The city can't even put flowers in the flower beds.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, but it's like I said before, people can see things. They can see improvements.
Absolutely.
Andy can spend $4 million making a better water plant for everybody, and that's great, but they can't see it.
Yeah.
And people like to be able to travel through towns and see pretty street lights.
And that's what we need, that 0.5% to go into general fund. So
picnic tables that when you sit on them, a nail doesn't stick you through.
They can do that kind of stuff. You know, they can mow the lawn and weed eat around the streets, and you know, we can't do that. We don't have any funding for it.
Correct.
Right.
There's
you know, do you want to complain about
picnic tables
animals, stray animals, and all that stuff running through town? We don't have any money to go into animal control.
Right.
You know, but they don't give us the freedom
to be able to do that.
To
and
even
say,
do it.
We need to be able to pay this person money so they have a job to do this.
Nobody wants to work for free.
You know.
But everybody wants things for free.
Right.
Right.
It's confusing to me.
Well, and it's in every aspect. You know, they say, okay, we need a church cleanup. Okay, great. Let's do a church cleanup. You know, we have one person that's actually a paid person there, and then a volunteer committees, and 6 people show up. You know, and you have 6 elderly people and 1 person. You know, it's every single aspect in Glenwood that does it. It's not the city. It's every bit of it. You know, and it's so hard. It really is. And I've been talking to so many people, and they have lots of complaints about different things, but they don't get that unless they step up and they get their head out of the sand and they say, okay, I see that problem, I'm going to fix that problem. It's like my kids when I come home and there's clothes on the floor, the trash cans are overflowing, and I'm like, hey, did you put that in the trash? Were you the last person to do that? Yeah. Well, now that it's overflowing on the floor, did it ever cross your mind to just take it outside?
It's not their problem.
It's not their problem.
Right.
The house isn't theirs, so
and
why do they
people
do
are complaining
that?
they want the streets paved. We can't take money out of this tax because the streets are not paved. Well, let's fix the water lines first and the sewer lines first, because That's, you know, you don't
Well,
want to
truly,
go.
how many employees do we have? City employees,
Like 8? Is there 8 guys that Brent has?
7, I think.
7 or 8 guys.
And they do what?
Everything.
Streets, water, fire department. I mean, how many hats are they supposed to? Animal control. How many hats do they wear? What job do they fully get to do? None. So
Are they
everybody
working 4 days a
complains.
week now, or 5, or do you know, since y'all came in, since the new administration, are they working 4 10-hour days or 5 days?
They work around the clock basically because they have to fix
I'm saying,
things.
I'm saying.
We're working 5 days a week, and right now with rural water
Are you saying
been,
that the 4-day work week is gone now, it's now 5?
It's easily a 5-day work week.
we're working 60 hours a week right now trying to get things caught
I'm
up.
saying, what's their regular schedule?
5 days a week.
5 days a week, 8 hours a day would be regular, but we haven't had a regular week.
But it's
And a while.
because they have to do all of those things.
And we
And
have
if
no
we don't have
to
money
hire
in the
anybody.
general fund to be able to hire other people to do streets and to do water and to do, you know,
Take care of the park.
take care of the parks, those same 8 guys are going to do it all. And they're not going to do it effectively because they can't. They physically can't. You know, and it's frustrating. You know, as a person moving into this town, I know we've been here for 7 years. This is my home. We're going to live here forever. It's got to get fixed. It has to, and we have to do it with this tax. It has to get done. And it's not an option. If we don't, I don't see how we're going to get things done next year. What do we do? Truly, what do we do? Spots is pulling out. They're done at the end of the week. We have 13 dogs in that shelter. What happens to them? They're getting euthanized. That's what will happen. 13 dogs are getting euthanized, and the city's going to pay for it. And that's coming out of our pocket, which we don't have that money either, but we're going to have to figure it out somewhere.
And then it'll be full again.
And then it's going to be full again.
And you'll start right over there and keep out 13-1.
That's right.
And we're gonna have to pay the
it's a
euthanizing.
never-ending cycle unless people step up and they help and they get this tax taken care of.
And
It's
well-
not going to get fixed.
And to solve that problem, they needed some volunteers.
Right. We need volunteers. I mean, people have to start giving back. It's just, it's like paying your tithe at church. You got to give back to the place you live. You know, I have children growing up in this city, and we don't have a strong enough economy or available jobs for them to stay here and work. All of our children are going to move away because we don't have jobs to give them. Our high schoolers have to outsource to other communities to work because we don't have jobs to give them. It's unacceptable. The salaries we pay people here is unacceptable. It's keeping us at a level of poverty in this city. And what happens with that, as a member of the call, I can tell you what happens with poverty. It causes people to neglect their children because they can't feed them. And then they start doing criminal activities to try to make money to take care of those children, and then they lose their children because now they're in jail for selling drugs, now they're in jail for using drugs, and that's what happens. So we're creating this system within this city that we're making people worse off. And we're doing nothing about it. We're going to sit around and complain about it. We're going to bicker about somebody 30 years ago who started the problem, some man who's long dead and gone, and all that does is upset his family members who are still here. Why are we pointing fingers? I have no idea. It's over and done with. That day's gone. It's fixing day. You know, and nobody else wants to do that. They want to say, oh, well, did you know so-and-so 40 years ago? Doesn't matter. It doesn't. We have so many problems, and we don't have enough people to take care of them. It's tragic.
What other questions do you have that you think are,
Okay, so on.
to get rid of the negatives?
On your bulletin here, I just have general questions, that's all.
That's fine, yeah, I know.
Okay. So on the Stevens presentation here, it shows, you know, 0.5 cent to city general, which includes streets. So this is different than this. So is this what's preferred, a quarter to streets? and a quarter to general fund? Or is this preferred half to general?
That's what you're gonna have to decide.
That's what the citizens have to figure out, and that's why we try to have all these meetings, is to have citizens here to,
But this.
to tell the council,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
This is a question, so it's gotta be decided before we actually,
It's gonna have to be decided before
ordinance.
that May
Correct.
Yeah.
17th date, and, you know, so basically it's gonna be decided probably by you and her and whoever else is in here, because that's all that's showing up.
I mean, that's all they're asking up there, is they're giving them two options. Trying to figure out what
These are
people
just
want.
suggestions.
yeah, these,
Yeah, I mean,
Two
I
different
was just
suggestions.
wondering, you know,
I don't think we have an answer for you, because really,
We need
truly,
to come up with an answer tonight on
That's what we-
which way you want it.
that's what we
And
want.
that's the way we put on, the council will vote on it to go on the ballot that way, and then the citizens will have to vote yea or nay on it.
Yeah, I recommend, if at all possible, the decision be made tonight, just so when you adopt all the ordinances, that there's not debate at that time. That would be my recommendation.
You know, for me, and I'm not a voting member of the council, but I'd like the whole 0.5% to go in the general fund and
That's basically,
say streets on it, so they have to put money in the streets and allow them to use that money that they see fit for the city, the betterment of the city. And now that's obviously my vote, but like again, I'm not a voting part of the thing, but I am a citizen of Glenwood, and I am gonna vote, so.
your other councilmen weren't here tonight, their wishes were the way it's written right there. So I would say, since you don't have a quorum here tonight, that would be the way it would stay, because that was what the last two meetings had generally been.
Yeah.
The 1 cent would go for the water and sewer projects, and the 0.5 cent would be in general, and the council would have to address and you're gonna have to put money in streets.
Right, you're gonna have to.
They're not gonna fund without it, but you've got some extra money there that doesn't have to all go in streets, that you could take care of some other stuff without raising any more
And
taxes.
as long as it's labeled on the ballot,
It has
they
to.
have to, the council has to vote on it.
So
It has to go over that part of the budget.
So the way that I would word this sales tax reallocation is I would break it out into a 1 cent and a 0.5 cent. The 1 cent will be bonds and water and sewer. So it would be it's not segregated out to half, quarter. You would have just a 1 cent that would be bonds and paying debt service on bonds, and then water and sewer. And you'd have a separate 0.5 cent.
That's pledged.
It wouldn't be broken out quarter and quarter. It would be one, it would be pledged to debt service. Then you'd have streets and general unallocated amongst those two.
Right, and that's
You
what I
got to
think.
use some for streets, but it gives the city council the ability to, I mean, you're the legislative body with the budgeting power. It lets you do your job.
Well, and that's also, we've heard examples of this year, the streets are real bad. We're gonna have to spend $280,000 on the streets. The next year, the streets aren't as bad because we just paved them the year before.
Yeah.
We only have to spend $100,000 to make some repairs. It gives
Gives
them
you
that
flexibility.
flexibility to do that. You know, so.
Rhoda, you got another question?
I do. The building that is rented out for water, and correct me if I'm wrong here, there's I don't even know what the building is, so, because Baker Street.
It's
I
right
don't
over
know
there.
what Baker Street is, so. On this building that was mentioned in a prior meeting, it would be used to service water customers, right? So my question is, are we adding that to that rate study? The expenses, the rent, the lease, all that kind of stuff?
Unfortunately, that will be in the rate study. That's way before my time. I can do nothing about it, but it's
Just answer the
there.
question.
Yeah.
Ma'am?
Just answer the question.
Yeah, I just want to know if,
Is it in the rate study?
It will have to be in the rate study because it's an expense.
And it's before your time and before
Right.
her
And-
time.
Before the
and it was
council that's
during
here's time,
COVID, right? That's what they talked about during COVID, and to my understanding is why they suggested that was because of the drive-through window. Because they wanted people to be able to pull up and pay their water bills through the window and not have to come inside during the whole COVID situation. And that's why it was looked at.
Was it a good purchase? Who knows?
You know, I don't know. This is just how the explanation was. And that's why it was done.
That will be there. There's nothing we can do about it.
You know, I mean, that's what it is. It's
And not for
done.
y'all to understand, y'all are new, and so seriously, I feel for you as far as your frustration. But the reality is, the building was not new. It was a knee-jerk kind of thing,
And the reality is, nobody here on this board
Right,
really
did it.
agrees to it.
And
None of
but
us
it's
actually
done.
like it. We all
Right.
actually don't like it, but it's done.
well, but when you talk about the rate study, then how much money is going into that building as far as computers and furnishings and all the other?
Last
what are
month, we
looking at?
voted on $2,000 for a motherboard and stuff like that to go over there, so we could have computers and actually start using it instead of paying for a building that isn't being used.
But that was
We're
something that
moving
was
the-
voted in
we're moving
before,
the-
though, right?
We're moving the computers and all that. All we've got to get is a server, not a server, a switch, and
Who's
a
gonna be doing
router.
yeah, who's gonna be doing the technical aspects?
The
related?
guy that they hired, who's
A local
doing
person,
the
correct?
city stuff.
Yeah.
We let go of the other guy that was charging us 2 or 3 times the amount, and we hired someone local. That was all in one of the council meetings.
January.
I don't know if it was the last one or the one before that, but they voted on.
Last council meetings.
They voted on that.
And kind of ballparking the figure of how much that's gonna be as well.
I have no idea how much it's
It's around
gonna be.
$4,000 for the computer equipment that you got to buy to get it.
I'm sure like everybody else, he gets paid by the hour, so it's gonna be based off of.
That's
how
the
much-
equipment. There'll be some hourly rate. Once
Right.
it gets set up, there won't be anything to it.
Yeah.
The reason I'm bringing up the building is, and because there's a reason I'm bringing it up, is because during the January meeting, when they were talking about leasing this property behind the rest area, Councilman Moore mentioned that, oh, if we do this, it's gonna wash out that. But it doesn't wash out for the rate study. And I just wanted to say that on record, you know, because Moore says, oh, it'll just wash that out. It doesn't wash it out.
Well, the thing that I think will help, you'll have to explain this one. The city bought some property years ago that the water and sewer department ended up paying for. And we're leasing with option of purchase, gonna sell that and getting the city's money back out of that. That will go into O&M money, I would take. It's an expense we're getting rid of, but you're gonna get the money that the city had, the water department had invested in it, you're getting it all back. And that will help you. It will be in your reserve money, so how would that be when you get rid of that piece of real estate? It's gonna show back up in reserve, the 300, what was it, Brenda, 300? Don't quote me on the number, because whatever we owed on it is whatever we got in it's what we're selling it for. But let's just use a number for the sake of figuring the night, $300,000. That may be wrong, don't quote me on that number, but that money would go into, it's gonna come back into city, into water and sewer account, and that will be reserve money, and that will help you on your rate study.
Yeah, it would eliminate the expense. You know, you get rid of the expense of having to deal with it on a monthly basis. So your expenses go down, and then if you put it in the O&M fund or reserve account, it'll just show up as whatever your rate analyst says are adequate and necessary reserves. You'll get a benefit from that.
So just to clarify, the water and sewer department separately bought this piece of land, and now it's being sold and being paid back to the water and sewer.
Yes.
But they only bought it, y'all understand that? That was really bought with general fund money.
No.
Yes, it was.
No, it was not. No, ma'am. It was not.
I don't mean now, Billy.
No, it was never bought with general fund money. If the water and sewer, the general fund didn't have the money to pay for it.
But that's what I'm saying. The auditors for Diamond Bank said you can no longer keep carrying that piece of property, and the interest payment was $6,000 or $8,000 a year. They said you've got to stop that, and you were on the council, and so the idea was there's water and sewer money, we'll let water and sewer buy it. But I'm just saying, initially, Billy, you know that land out there, it was not owned by by water and sewer, it was owned by the in the general fund. So when y'all talk about monies into the general fund, you know, there are people who are saying, wait a minute, you know, general fund kept paying out the interest, they kept paying that. Would any of that have come back to them? That's, I've got all the minutes.
But I think one of the, and I'm not trying to cut you off by no means, but that's one of the things I think we're trying to address is if that did happen, when that happened, they had to use that money out of the water because they had no money anywhere else, right? That's what you just said?
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's not what I said, but that's okay.
Was that what you, well, what did you say? You said that the water ended up, the general couldn't pay the interest, and so that the water and sewer took over the land in order to pay the payment, the interest.
They paid the principal and everything.
Because general fund didn't have any money.
I didn't say that.
We took out a loan,
Brenda
the
did.
general fund, to get the
Purchase
land.
it.
It was supposed to be for the depot. When we finally found out that the Historical Society wouldn't put money into the depot unless it was put down there where original track was at, we ended up having to put the depot down there. Okay, the general fund had invested in it for the depot and for an investment. So water and sewer was the only account that
Had money.
because we carried the loan for 5 years. That's the limit that a city, general, or street can have a loan. It's 5 years. Okay, at the end of that 5 years, the bank carried the loan. We couldn't pay for it. So water and sewer purchased it. They paid for every penny that general fund had put into it, including maintenance.
And that's why water and sewer is going to get it
And that's
back.
why
But that's
water and
the
sewer
point I was trying to make
owns
is
it.
because of the way the taxes are, that's what we're getting pigeonholed into is doing this, is, you know, is water and sewer having the money and not having any money in the general fund. I'm not trying to argue with any of the points that you're trying to make. I'm trying to agree and say that's one of the reasons why we're trying to do this tax reallocation is because we got pigeonholed into spending the money out of certain accounts because that's what had the money. When, if we reallocate it, we'll have some money into general fund there where we can make some decisions, you know. I don't know. I'm just saying that was kind of proven a part of my statement is what I was saying. I wasn't trying to argue with anybody.
But Brenda, one more time. All the money that City General had paid, water and sewer paid for to clean up with the auditors, and water and sewer owns that property fully.
Yes.
And that money will go back into the account that the money is owed to.
Okay, that's all I wanted was a clarification. I had no idea of history.
I don't disagree.
We don't either.
I just wanted a clarification of would that money, because Moore said in the past meeting, oh, well, this one will wash up that one, and I just need the dots connected, that's all.
That we paid every penny that we put into that general fund, water and sewer paid it all to the general fund. So therefore, water and sewer owns it now. So therefore, when we sell it, all the money that we sold for will have to go to water and sewer.
Okay, that's all, just clarification, that's it. Okay, so my next question is, and this is dreadful and awful, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. What happens if the city is not awarded anything for a water and sewer grant, or not as much as needed? Do we borrow the money anyway? Do we figure out, do we need less? Do we need more? What if we don't get any grant? I mean, I think we'll get something because you've got experience and you've written the grant, whatever, requested all that applications and stuff like that. So I don't think it'd be nothing, but what if it's not as much and the 4 million doesn't cut it?
Well, the 4 million will.
The 4 million will cover the water project.
Covered all without a grant.
It's like 3.7.
It just won't do
like that.
the sewer projects we
Right.
want to do to fix the manholes and the water
Right,
leakage.
The 4 million will cover the water project alone.
Okay.
And that's why we went for, it was actually like 3.7 or something like that, and then we went for 4 in order to cover everything, because cost of material, everything's changing daily, right? Cost of labor, cost of material, cost of we ended up capping it off at 4 million because it's a nice even number, but the actual project itself was like 3.7 if I'm not mistaken.
3.7, yes.
So if we do get the grant though, then we can do both.
Because somehow I just remember in the beginning, like the very first meeting, we were just talking about sewer, and then water came up, or?
So we've always been talking about water and sewer both.
And sewer, okay.
But the sewer project, we're not written up by ADQ for it. We've got a problem that we know we've got, and it can be addressed slowly out of maintenance. We may not get it all done before ADQ comes back in there at some point in time. Hopefully we can get it addressed, but we were trying to get them both addressed in the grant. If we get the grants, one of the grants, we should be able to get both projects done. If we don't, we've got to do the water. The water project's got to be done, period.
Right.
The sewer project is something that is infiltration that needs to be fixed. And it needs to be fixed tremendously, but we have fixed right now, Mary Street lift station is not running over anymore. We found a 4-inch service line that was wide open in the creek, in the ditch that was taking water before the culvert did. So we've got that, the major part of town that was the worst part of town, we've already got that problem fixed. We can dodge, it would be nice to get the sewer system completely fixed if we get one or the other of the grants. If we were to get both the grants, which I seriously doubt,
I doubt it.
we might get one of them. But the money for the project has still got to, the water project has got to go no matter what. If you do this and you were to get one of the grants, we might still get both projects done. If we don't, the water project.
The grant is dedicated to that specific project, so.
That's correct.
Get it for the sewer, and you still, the money's allocated for the bond is still for the water.
Right.
So
Well, the money for the bond could be for water or sewers, it's just going to be for water.
So there's going to be,
dedicated.
there will be a question for the water side, for the water project that has to be used for water. I'm assuming, and that's another question that we have, if there's going to be a question to issue bonds for the sewer project, that'll need to be contemplated also. Are we not going to know that until?
You won't know that until the
17th.
That's the reason for the meeting
Yeah.
that was moved for then. And we're assuming right now you're not going to get either one of them.
So we're saying on the ballot, it would be separate water and sewer, is that what you're saying?
They would probably, we will know before then whether you would apply for water, for sewer also. You're more than likely not going to get either one of the grants.
But on
Comes
the
back to the ballot,
on the ballot, there'll be a question for water improvements.
not
And
sewer.
Well,
If-
that's what we're talking about. If there's a grant and there's enough capacity, there could also be a question for a sewer project. But it would be separate. There would be two separate questions in that case. But we know that there'll be one for water.
Absolutely.
If one of the two project applications are funded, I suspect it would be the water because of the health department letter that mandates the improvements. Because
Did we give them a copy of that letter when we applied for the?
yeah, and they had it before we gave it to them. So, yes.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know they had it. I'm just saying, if maybe we put that in the application to say, hey,
The only
Yeah,
thing,
it's in there.
Rhonda, that would happen if we got one of the projects grant funded, and you'll know that before the next meeting. That's why we postponed the meeting.
Yes.
Then we would change the ordinance to do both projects. But we're probably not going to get sewer funded anyway. But if we got a grant on the water project, you could come in with reallocation and do both projects and have both the city's problems solved in one loan.
And that's what I meant by rushed, because we won't know, and then we have to.
We will know before the meeting.
Right.
We will have it fixed before the meeting because the grant opening application is
Yep.
about a week ahead of us. So we would know before then.
I think
We're not looking for either grant to come through right now,
Yeah.
so we'll just do water. But if you happen to get the water funded, you could do both projects, and they would still both be done on schedule, and both be, you wouldn't do two loans of the money. It would all be, y'all would wrap it all up in one ordinance. You do one loan, one grant application. You would do, it would all be one time. You just have two projects going. That is probably not going to happen. Be a blessing if it did, because the city could solve both of its problems in one swoop, but we're probably not going to get to address, but I don't think you're going to get a grant.
So what reason do you think you're not going to get any grant? Is there a particular reason you think we're not?
There's going to be some grant money out there. There's $450 million for the state of Arkansas. Is that what's coming through?
I don't remember the exact number. The competition is fierce.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
And there's a lot of systems.
We are, but there are a lot of people whose straits are more dire.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It's on a priority. Andy explained that how this is funded.
A lot of the applicants for this funding have far worse problems than the city of Glenwood.
They probably have 2 letters.
They have, yeah, and some have, sewer on the ground and water that can't, that's not palatable, it's unsafe. Neither of those are apply to you. So if you get funded, I think it would be the water, and I don't know if you will or not. There's no way to know.
So we'll just take it as a blessing if we do.
It will be a blessing if you do.
Okay. You ready for the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This one is, and I'm sorry, I'm not picking on anybody or anything. These are
We'll take it that way.
general questions
You
here.
need an answer.
Okay, so at the last meeting, Billy said that the interest rate wasn't going to be higher, but the rates are higher at 4.55, and that's at the time that you did that. You want to talk about the interest rates?
Yeah, so I think in that discussion last time we were talking about the 2 different separate bond issues, if you will. So if you allow me to go back to my presentation real quick, let me just show you. Get the word.
That's why you get the big bucks.
Yeah. So you'll see here, the one in the green, none of those bond issues are going to get paid off, but those are all extremely low rates. In fact, the 2010 bond issue was done at a 0% interest rate. So in essence, you're paying 1% for that service charge that was talked about. These 2, though, the ones in the red box, those sales tax bonds, they will be at higher rates, but just those 2 particular ones because they're secured by the sales tax. So again, in order to reallocate the sales tax, we do have to pay off those 2 particular bond issues. So just so there's no confusion here, we're basically talking about 2 sets of debt obligations. And so these in the green box, again, nothing's going to happen with those. They're going to stay the exact same. And if you want, I can give you the interest rates on all those as well. But those 2 right there, the sales tax bonds, will be a little bit higher. I think we talked, I pulled it out, but it was like maybe 0.5% to a full percentage point higher on these 2 here. But that becomes just part of the cost of doing this particular transaction.
What about the payment, though? Doesn't the payment pay more towards the principal or something? I thought I heard you saying one time, we're not paying it right currently. Does that make sense? We get it, we don't pay for it out of the,
We have to make up for it, I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't remember what he was saying.
Currently, not in this, but like how it gets paid right now,
Yeah.
we're not making enough.
Oh, correct.
Enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you'll see at the bottom here, it says in part by. There's not necessarily, all of that's not coming off of those particular sales tax. Some of it's coming from water and sewer revenues. That's the way it was. That was the way it was voted on back at that particular point in time.
So it's going to fix that where all of the debt service is paid through the sales tax and not.
That's correct. It'll just be
from
sales
water
tax
sewer
and
revenue.
being pledged
Right.
to it. No
So
water and sewer
essentially,
revenues.
it's going to come off of people's water bills, and it's going to be paid for by the sales tax.
Some of it will, yes.
And so I guess the bottom line to answer your question is I just want you to be aware that there's 2 debt obligations, and so just so there's no confusion, the ones in the green box, the rates will stay the same. The ones in the red box would be the ones that we're talking about.
Right, and that's the 2004 and 2006, ones that 2.5 with a 1% service charge for a total of 3.5.
Correct.
The 2006 is 2.25 with a 1% service charge, total of 3.25. And then I get the 4.55 is what it was when you did this presentation.
Correct.
What is it today? Because
It's about the same.
it's about the same. Okay. And does that include the 1% surcharge?
No, there's no. So with us, there's no service charge.
No service charge on this. Okay.
All the fees, everything associated with it, it's just like buying a house when you
And
pay
those
your
are
real
those,
estate agent.
Cost of the bond.
Correct, cost of issuance.
Cost
All
of
of the,
issuance.
and again, we've just put a swag in there for now, but a percent, like we talked about a few meetings ago, that in there is a one-time cost. It's paid. It's in the financing. It's reflected in the numbers that you've seen, the 560 number. What we can't guarantee, and as you know, is just the interest rate movement. So they could go down, they could go up. We just don't know. And so, but the way we're talking about here, the tax, is that there'd be enough revenues available if it went up. Let's say it went up to 7 or 575, just, or it might go down, right? But whatever it would be, there'd be enough monies available there to make that payment to ensure that's the case. So, but the reason we have to, as we've talked about before, pay off those two sales tax issues is because they're currently pledged. Those revenues are pledged to those outstanding debt obligations. So we have to pay that off in order to do something new with the current sales tax. Hopefully that's clear.
Ask a question that Sarah was, I think it goes back to what Brian was saying. Sarah was saying right now that the sales tax, even though we have a 1 cent tax to cover all the stuff with water and sewer, we only have so much of that tied to the sales tax, and the rates are having to pay the rest of it, even though the sales tax is now generating enough money to make that full payment. So when under the new, when you get the reappraisal done or whatever for the water rate study, if we redo this, we're going to get 100% credit for that $9 million because the sales tax is going to be able to apply to all that, where right now it's not. That's what, if I understood what she was telling us, even though we've got money today enough to make the whole note payment in our rate study, because it says only so much percentage of it can be made, then the surplus money we're getting in the account, we're not getting credit for and won't under the new rate study unless we redo these. And we will get, and that's going to be a big deal on our rate, because you're going to get full credit for it, where right now you're not. Explain that a little bit. Do you remember where she was coming from on that?
Yeah, so right now you have, I believe, you have the half-cent sales tax that's only going to pay bonds. Then you have the 1 cent, and I'm looking at your notes here. A 1/4 cent of that is pledged to debt service on your outstanding. Which one is it? Is it the 2004 or the 2006?
The 4 would be the 1/4%, because that's where the 1% comes in.
Okay. And then you have a 1/4 of that goes to just water and sewer, and then you have the half for streets. And the part for streets, you don't get any credit for that because it doesn't go into the water and sewer department. This new tax, the entire 1% will be pledged to the bonds and to with the remainder going to water and sewer. So going back to what I said, either the entirety of the debt service is excluded and only the difference, you net out the amount of the sales tax that's used to pay the debt service, that excess goes for the benefit of the rate study, or you look at the entirety of the debt service and you look at the entirety of the sales tax, not just a percentage of it.
That's fuzzy.
Well,
It is. Now, one of the factors in the rate study is the bond issue cost, which is a little bit over $400,000. Is that amortized over the year, or is it
It is.
1 year?
It is, but in this case, I would argue that the rate study won't include the bond offering because we're talking about the sales tax revenues, right? So the rate study is a project. Well, normally we would have a rate study involved, but we'd be just using your water and sewer revenues to finance that project. And so what the I'm kind of getting out of my lane here, but Act 605 is basically set up because there's a lot of cities out there that were issuing debt but didn't have enough money to make sure that they could pay for it. They weren't working with us because we want to make sure that they had enough money to pay their debts back. But long story short, that issuance cost, if it was a true water and sewer revenue supported bond issue, that would take into account. Because this is a sales use tax issue, I would argue that that's not going to be included in the rate study because the pledged revenues are your sales and use tax revenues. So,
but we really don't know that because it's not tried and tested yet.
Yeah,
right.
you do know that one way or the other it is going to get, explain that one more time. Because it is going to get credited for you one way or the other. We just don't know which way, but it will. Explain that one more time.
Well, for your question, yes, I agree with Jason. It should be excluded. If in the event that it is not, essentially the cost of issuance are amortized. I mean, because it's all part of the borrowing, right? The city doesn't come out of pocket for that. So if it is included, it would just go, like I said, the entirety of the debt service is looked at, but the entirety of the sales tax collections are looked at. You net out with the difference still being your revenue gain. Or it's all excluded and you only get your top net out that is added to the non-rate revenue in the revenue side.
And typically in our experience, when you're doing the rate study, we're looking at the annual cash flows, right? So as he's saying, all of that's baked in, if you will, into the actual annual payments. So again, we're projecting here, but let's say that payment's $560,000 a year. If you were doing a true water and sewer revenue issue, we would, after revenues, expenses, etc., you would make sure you had enough money to cover that payment and that you had rates equal the amount in order for that money to flow in. So again, that number, that issuance cost is included in those annual cash flows.
But right now in your projection, if we just go to your page 7, you've got $309,000 from what last year's income was that would go into the revenue account of water and sewer on the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, you can see this, and if you have the presentation, but as you see, we're basically estimating the payment to be approximately $560,000 a year. You've seen the numbers. 1% sales tax at $870 basically means you have about 50 cents more per dollar in payment. That's a surplus of the 1 cent that will come back to the utility of approximately $310,000 a year. And so this number, if the voters approve this, these bonds are issued, this number will be fixed. Now it might be higher, it might be lower as I mentioned, but this number will be fixed. This will be the changing variable because if this number were to grow or go down, this number is the number that would change. And so that's the kind of right now we're projecting based on 22 collections that you would have approximately $310,000 or so coming back to the utility to be used for, the sewer project in the future, whatever maintenance and operation projects you have, if you were to do pay-as-you-go. So that's kind of how that's intended to work, if that is clear. Okay.
So 605, worst case scenario, would have to take the $560,000 bond payment as an expense. But guess what? You're going to get the $309,000 on the revenue side.
Well, actually, you'd get the $876.46.
Okay, and then the $560 would come off of that. Okay.
Yeah.
But your gain would be the $309,000.
That's right.
Worst case scenario. Really and truthfully, it would almost be better if they did it that way.
Well, it's going to net out the same.
Yeah.
I mean, your net change is going to be, in the first year, the $309,000 in surplus. That's going to be your net change, either way they do it.
So it's going to be counted one direction or the other, it's still going to get counted
Yes.
as a benefit to the rate study.
Yes.
I still don't have a comfort level with that, but I guess the trust factor, right?
There's not a trust factor there. It's black and white,
No, I mean,
right?
what I meant by that was they haven't done any rate studies yet.
Oh yeah, they've done some rate studies. When the other income's going to be included in it. There was, the gentleman from Rural Water told us, as long as that's concrete and what it is and I can see it, you're getting full credit for your additional income. Because that's income coming into the water and sewer department. And he can't exclude it. It's income that has to go there. And he said, I can't exclude it. He said, there's not many cities using a sales tax to subsidize our water and sewer system. They said, if you are, you're going to get full credit for it. He told us that in November.
I think there's been, people do rate studies all the time, but not because it's been a requirement under Act 605. It's the Act 605 requirements of a rate study that are new. But rate studies have always been a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know rate
Yeah.
studies are done, I just meant under 605,
Yeah.
which you said earlier. They haven't done any under 605, they're still really doing amendments to it. Legislative.
Yes. Yeah.
Glenwood has done several rate studies through the years, and the one that got everybody so concerned was the one that who funds the Forest Service and all that, USDA. Who did that rate study?
Communities Unlimited.
More recent one was about 28.
Okay, and that gentleman said because the sales tax is falling off at some point in time, I will not give you credit for it. And so he did the rate study that showed we need to raise water rates way up here, but he took $1 million worth of sales tax revenue a year and threw it out the window. He said, that's not income.
That's communities unlimited.
And he said, you can't count that because that sales tax isn't guaranteed to be there. Well, it's guaranteed to be there till the debt service is paid for. And at that point in time, your rate would be relooked at anyway. And this is what's got the controversy in town about, oh, we're just going to go tremendously up on our rate study. And Rural Water said you can't do that. If you've got other income coming in, it's got to be considered as income. And you're saying it can be considered one of two ways, but it is going to be considered, that's for sure,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
They're going to have to consider it one way or the other. And the net gain, it doesn't matter which way it gets in there, it's still going to hit the bottom line. We're going to get the credit for the sales tax if we redo it. If we don't redo it, we're not getting full credit for it.
Correct.
I understand.
Public medicine.
I only have two more questions. These are going to be easy. Okay. The next one is, on the ballot, proposed ballot, is that the only thing? Is this a special election just for that?
Yes.
Okay. So turnout, I mean, we've got to get the public to turn out for this, because if it's the only thing on the ballot, then, you know, it's not like it's a special election. So who pays for a special election? What's the cost? Does the city have to incur that cost? And what is it about? 10 grand?
I have no idea. But yeah, it's the city.
The city would have to pay for that.
Yeah.
Well, Brenda, what would it be, basically?
I would say about 10, because I did the last time, and whichever, since it's gonna affect both sides, we have to divide the expenses. Help general fund and help water and sewer.
Okay, so internally you would split.
Yeah, normally, that's what we did last time, because it's considered partly the city side of sales taxes and water side too. But that would be the decisions of the payment on the council.
So, I mean, that's a consideration. Say 10 grand is a lot of money when we really have none.
You're not going to have any if you don't do the election. I mean, you keep coming up with the reasons not to do anything, and we cannot do anything. We can leave it alone. And I guarantee if you leave it alone, we're going to have a rate increase, and we're not going to have any more help in the other departments.
I was playing with some figures, just thinking, because I know rights. Gosh, I don't think I can
What do we come up with, like,
$35 a month.
pay almost $100
What, on a minimum bill?
And,
But see, the
If we have to
problem-
pay for the expansion
The
ourselves.
4 million, just
Yeah.
the 4 million, not the cost of living, because that's
Right.
still going to carry on.
Right,
The
right.
problem with that for new council members is, at the first meeting when y'all came, and it was a great meeting, very informative, Norma Lowry was up here and said something about, she sure didn't want to be on sewer, and, water was okay, didn't want to be on sewer. At that point, the mayor said something about, yeah, one of these days, we don't want your sewer bills will be higher than water bills. And at that point, Andy Franks, you asked Andy, it's on the recording, you asked Andy, and Andy said, yeah, in some situations, that's exactly it. Sewer would be higher than water. Folks in Glenwood, with the 800 people that are on water and sewer, sewer is already higher than water. Norma Lowry didn't know that, she's not on sewer. Billy hadn't looked at it, because Billy's up on the mountain, he's not on sewer.
Sewer's not, what's the water, sewer rates are not higher than water
I
rates.
can bring
Sewer,
every,
sewer's higher than water?
right now, sewer's higher than water. So for the 800 people, Billy, that's what I'm trying to say, Andy. None of us, we love Glenwood, we've all been volunteers, we've all served, okay? And we care. But right now, you've got 800 and something households who pay more on sewer today. And what we're hearing is, and oh, by the way, we're going to put this in water, and we're going to take care of the rural people and everybody, and that's great, and we'll all sing kumbaya. But when it comes to the taxpayers and the water and sewer users in Glenwood, I'm a widow, one house. Mine was $80-something last month.
Well, if you
Water and
do,
sewer. I'm just saying, Billy, you got to understand what you're working with here, and you didn't even know that. Neither did Andy.
Well, there is a lot of information. I mean, you just,
It's hard.
it truly is,
And all
but
of
it
us are
doesn't
being
help.
negative, and we're not.
It doesn't help. No, there's a lot of negativity going on, and it's overwhelming at times, especially for people who are trying to help and figure this out. And if we ask a question, it's like, well, why didn't you know that? Well, because I started literally a few months ago.
That's what we all
And so
do.
we're trying to understand this, but also coming from my perspective, where we lived in Arizona, we were in a county island, we paid the second highest water rates in the entire nation.
Second
In the
to
entire
California.
nation. We were second behind San Francisco only. So, I mean, truly, this is a gift.
Yeah,
It's a
you
gift.
look-
And I still drank bottled water because I didn't like the smell and the taste of chlorine. So, I feel like everything that's being done here is everybody's doing everything that they can constantly to make this work. We're all residents. We're all doing what we can to make this work. But there's so much bickering and so much negativity and so many people that are so stuck in the past that want to point fingers. It's really hard to get anything done.
the only
It really
thing,
is.
the only thing I've ever said, and you can't do anything about this, the sewer system only serves the customers it serves. We have a few that's out of city limits, not many, but we do have a few. And if you do an improvement in it, it's got to be on the sewer rate, whatever that be. If you do an improvement to water, it's got to be on the water rate, whatever that be. And you've got money borrowed in this bond issues that are paying off water and sewer bonds on sales tax. And we'll still have when you get through with it. It's just this phase of what you're doing right now will cover a water addition. But there's water and sewer in our bond issues right now. And that's not going to change. But still, if you do a sewer improvement, you can't put that on somebody that lives at Norman that's not getting a sewer bill. Sewer has to go to sewer and water has to go to water. You can't say, okay, I want city sewer, but I want the people that live. Do you want to pay for sewer for me in town that I don't? If you don't have sewer, nobody's going to want to pay if you live in the city limits and you don't have sewer, and you don't have a sewer bill to pay for either. But you can't bill people that don't have sewer. You can't make water pay for that, for sewer. That'll never work.
And the
cost of treating sewer is way more than the cost of water.
But anyway, I think that's got that question answered.
And
What's
that's why we need
next?
to keep the half cent or sewer.
So my last comment, I'm going to combine them together. First of all, these streets in Glenwood are so nice compared to South Louisiana. I had to do an alignment on my car every 6 months. No joke. So that was one of the deciding factors of my husband and I buying in Glenwood, was because how nice it was. It's clean here. It's like, I have so much appreciation for the city employees, because, you know, living in South Louisiana is just, I'm not gonna dog it, but it's a dump. People just don't care. They throw things everywhere. And then you come here and it's like nice roads. You know, my teeth aren't clattering when I'm going down the street. It's nice. And I mean, people don't appreciate it until they don't have it. And I've never had it. So I guess my comment to citizens is be very appreciative, because whatever you're doing is right. Okay, so that's my comment and compliment to the streets of Glenwood, and I do really like living here. The thing that I do see is the lack of trust between the community and the council members, and that's disheartening. It almost sounds corny, but it's disheartening. And so, personally, right now, from this, I would rather see a half a cent go to general funds and have the council, they're fiduciarily responsible for this budget. They are responsible, and so there has to be a trust. If there's not a trust, then damn it, do a recall. Get them out. Put people in there that you can trust. I don't know anybody. I trust everybody automatically till that trust is lost some sort of way. But I trust that they're going to make right decisions. Can there be a preliminary draft of a budget to let the public see what might be spent? For an example, like this up here, how a budget might look if it all goes in the general fund. What are your wishes? This much to the fire department, this much to the police department. Have something, some sort of visual and stamp on it draft, not, you know, just example or specimen or whatever you have to do to be able to grab the citizens into that, to have that trust factor that where that half cent is going is going to be for the good of the community.
Well, and I think that would be great, but we also wanted people to come here so they could tell us what they wanted to be spent, you know? So, I mean, we could, but it's going to be me and 3 other council members figuring it out for everyone because nobody showed up to give us input, you know? And that's the hard thing, because what I find important, you know, Chris may not, or Alan may not, or Jimmy may not, and we may not agree, but we need more people to give us their input to say, this is what's important to me. This is what affects me. This is what I need as a Glenwood resident.
They're all representing their districts.
Right.
And nobody from their districts is communicating with them.
Unless they want to complain about something.
So then,
I can do what she's asking very easy, because the budget's not going to change from this year to next year unless you put some money in city general. You're not going to take all that money out of. Give me an idea of what you want to show in the budget, and I can put the number to the budget.
well, I mean, if
in
we
20
did that,
minutes.
if we did that half cent, it would be approximately $435,000.
Oh, you got to put some, okay.
And then, and you're going to have to put money in streets.
To start
Okay,
with
what do y'all
streets.
want? Y'all see the same money going in the street? Okay. So that's leaving us 200. I mean, I can do this. This is not a hard thing to do. It's not. You're looking at 217,000. If I leave 0.25% in the street, because you're going to have to fund street, you're looking at $200,000 is all I can put across everything you want the city to do. A police officer, Brendan just figured. I mean, you figured today, what's a police officer going to cost us? One officer.
60,000.
I need 60,000. I've got 200. I've got $200,000 to play with in the budget. If the change you're talking about right now is it, Okay, $60,000 hires one policeman.
Okay, we need a Parks and Rec person.
We ain't gonna be, there's no money for salaries in this. It won't work, even with this. But $60,000, I'm now down to $140,000. I put zero money in the fire department. What do you want in the fire department?
I don't know.
Okay, let's say $40,000. I'm just throwing a number out there to give you a quick synopsis. I can show you how the budget's gonna look different right now. Let's say we put $40,000 in the fire department. I'm now down to $100,000 to spread between parks, animal control, and everything else the city's wanting done.
Right.
So how do you want me to break that $100,000 down? I put it in the budget for you tonight and make it. I'll show you exactly how it's going to be spent. It won't vary any because it can't. You're looking at $200,000 is all you're looking
I'm
at.
talking about if this passes.
That's what I'm talking about. I can put that to you.
Because that 0.5%, that money,
It was coming out of streets and
yeah,
going
off
into
the
general,
top
and you
goes
still
into
gotta leave part of it in
which you want-
streets.
You know, we have to have 200 and something going to streets automatically. And then, so out of that
Well, and
400.
we say that, but in the budget, if this year,
Right.
like I said, we don't spend the 250, so then next year, you
Sure.
have a little bit of
But
leeway.
starting out budget.
Maybe.
Let's say a starting out
You get a
budget,
grant?
we need to have 200 and something thousand for streets this year, you know?
How much did we spend this year on streets, on the jobs that we did, and we got grants?
We're spending $250,000 and not doing, and we got a $300,000 grant. You got the 200 and, the money that was coming into streets back in 87 is $250,000. Back in 18. You don't need to cut that amount out. So you're only looking at $100,000 to go between animals, and that's if you don't put one police officer in. That's going to give us 3 police officers. And I think that's a hard decision. I can put that number in the budget because there's not that much money here to play with.
Right.
We're not having a sales tax increase. We're just
Right. Now, obviously, if that 435, if we have a good sales tax year, it could go up to 600,000 or, that 0.5%. Who knows? If people decide to buy a whole bunch of buses.
and your budget will have to look at what your last year's income was to make a guess next year.
Right. But we're also, the way we're at right now, nobody else is getting a raise for the next, I don't know how many, you know what I mean? We can't retain employees if we can't pay them.
Right, and they're not, right.
Why am I going to work for you for $11 an hour when I can go to the sawmill and make $20 an hour? We have to be able to retain our employees. We train them, we do things to them, and then all of a sudden we say, you know what, you're capped out, $13, whatever.
I will give you a budget of what the mayor's got to give a proposed budget anyway. I'll give you a proposed budget with this number in there and putting 0.25% back in streets, and I'll give you a budget. I can do that in 15 minutes. It's all on a computer. You're not going to like it. We're not getting enough money to do anything with, but we'll get the budget to where it'll work. We're not helping the city general budget a lot in doing what we're doing, but we can get it to where maybe 3 police officers can be here for the city, which we need some police officers. I'd like to see 4 or 5. We'll never afford that. We got $200,000 and $60,000 a pop. $60,000 a pop's got all the bennies in it that's extra. That's not the poor police officer. He ain't taking home much money. Not at $60,000 because 20%, 25% of that went to Lofty and blah blah blah. The police officer, the lowest paid guy we got in the city right now. Huh?
That's not count maintaining the vehicle with radio,
No.
the gas and the maintenance and.
Yeah, that's not a vehicle for him to drive. That's
not
he's riding on a vehicle we're getting grants still hopefully for. And not buying fuel for it. But I'll do that for you. If that's a question you want, I'll have that for you at the next meeting.
I just think because the citizens have this misconception that it's, like something's going to be taken from them, and they don't have a trust. And so I think if you kind of put it out there that
I'll have that.
This is what we're planning on doing, because this is going forward. This will be effective January, right?
Yes.
It'll be effective January 1st.
That's not a problem. I'll do that for you.
Okay.
I think one of the misconceptions is that there's gonna be a whole bunch of money that goes in general fund.
But it's
for
just-
stuff, and there's not.
Right, you're talking about an extra,
Yeah, that.
$200,000
I think that's a lot of the
maybe.
misconception. They're gonna put all that money in general fund. There's
I
not
will have
gonna be
that.
all
That's-
that money.
That's not a problem. I'll do
There's
that.
already the need
I
for it
do
now.
think it needs, nothing needs to be done, but anyway, I do feel like it should be half a cent and let our councilman make that decision where it needs to go, because, like he said, you know, you may not need that on these streets one year or the next year. I mean, I just think it should be flexible.
you know what the sad thing is I'm excited about that half a cent. I'm more excited about that half a cent than the $4 million water project, and it doesn't give the city general hardly any money. You know, but I mean, I'm more excited about that. Me personally,
Yeah.
You
Because I
know?
mean, right now, there's absolutely nothing for general.
no.
Like, I'm thinking, how do you pay your insurance premiums? I'm in the insurance business. How do you, where do
The
you
only
put
thing
that?
we've got, the city general budget is, what, I don't have a budget here, I've
Where you
worked,
get property tax coming in.
your property taxes is where, and your state turnback money is the, what the general fund operates off of.
And you do.
So there is a general,
We get, what
there
sales
is
tax,
general
percentage of
revenue coming
percent?
in.
Yes.
It's not like you're totally,
Yeah, your 5 mil property tax, you can look on your tax bill and see what that equates to. It's, and then your state turnback money is about $22 a person this year,
Spectrum back, no, it's
14.
Excise tax.
No,
No,
it's-
did.
So for every resident we've got living in the city of Glenwood State, where that used to be, 20 years ago was $148,
$48.
it's now $14. That's what's happened in the city general. It went from 48 to 14, you got inflation over the last 20 years. But they're giving you the money in streets that they weren't. I'm not trying to take away from streets. We gotta leave some money in streets, but you're getting that money back from the state in streets, but it's specific. You can't spend it anywhere but streets.
but I do think that lumping it together like that does give you flexibility, but then you have the trust issues, so, I don't know, that's just kind
And I
of.
don't really know.
I will give you I'm giving you a budget to look at. We can have that done in 30 minutes or 15 minutes. It won't
It's just a
take
draft,
long.
that's all it is, just to give people a comfort level in.
I'll have that. That's not.
And I don't know if there's as much
We'll do
trust
that.
issue, you know, or if it's just the same
The
dozen
same-
people, you know what I mean, that have a trust issue, honestly.
That are bickering back and forth on Facebook and, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I truly don't know. I mean, if everybody was concerned as you thought they were, then they would be in here. And there's not a single person, you know.
The thing that we need to do, the stuff that's put on Facebook and YouTube and all that, the negativity, the people that don't know, it's running them away and it's going to be a no vote and you're not going to do anything. If we don't figure out a way to get positive,
Right.
I've seen it in Glenwood before. Facebook will get people out to vote on the negative. If we keep putting out negative, well, I don't like it because of this, and I don't like it because of that.
The only thing
We'll
we're
get to people
asking,
where they won't vote for it.
the only thing that we're asking was them to come in and listen and try to give us input on where they would want that 1.5%. I mean, I don't understand why
Well, and I
there's
think
anything negative about that.
those few people have constantly stirred up so much stuff, you know, that it really drives people away. They, you know, I think people would rather, you know, do something for anybody else than someone in here on the city council. It's been difficult. I mean, we've had people in the cafe that we said, please come, and they're like, no, you don't know, no, thank you for the invitation, you know, and they're really like, they do not want to come here for any reason. And it's really sad that it has been that way, but it's the constant stirring up. It's those few people that won't drop it. And then, you know, like we just bought that piece of equipment, and then all of a sudden you see the picture of the piece of equipment on there, and they just wanted to spend all your money. That's what they just did. They spent all your money on that piece of equipment right there. You know,
Get a
and
lot of
it's,
stuff done with it.
Tax deal,
right? I
City
know.
needs-
With
City needs
this tax
equipment.
deal and my YouTubes, I am strictly trying to inform, and I try to stick to the points, and these are the questions I'm gonna ask. And I said 4 times in that YouTube video, the date and the time, and I have to say I'm pretty disappointed, because because 175 people viewed that video. 175 people. And I said it 4 times what time this was. So I'm really disappointed. So, but the intent of the YouTube is to inform. I mean, it's obviously people are watching.
I personally know that water rates are going up if we don't do this. Because I've worked here too long. I know. I, as a citizen, and I'm gonna live here till I die, because Kate Ford lived in Hot Springs. But I can't afford that increase on my water bill when we have so many people enjoying our town and paying sales tax. I feel like they should help me share the cost of this water by the way we're revamping the sales tax. Because that $4 million is going to create us to have an increase. I'm not stupid, I've lived here long enough, I know. And I'm not saying this because I work here, because I'm getting to retirement age and I've got to live on a fixed income, you know? But if we don't redo this where it's going to help with our rates, normal people like only live on fixed incomes can't afford the water bill. And we're going to have to raise the water bill because of that $4 million, and we're going to have to do the $4 million because of the health department. I've seen them come down on it. So we don't have any choice but to revamp it. Now, how you segregate the rest, you know, that'll be y'all's choice.
I think the tough part is going to get voter participation.
But we're going to have to vote for this.
If the council can get it voted, I mean, can do their thing, I'll go door to door explaining it.
Well, we're gonna have to do our thing if we're gonna proceed forward by
If they
The
do what
17th.
the 17th.
And that's the thing is,
And I do think it's going to be a lot clearer. I know these meetings have been us all having lots of conversations about a lot of different things, but once Mr. Moyers gets everything hammered out and lined it out, well, this is what we're doing. You either vote against it, for it, whatever it might
and
be.
then-
But to your point, you raised 2 documents, and you're like, "Which are we doing?" Well, and that was part of the discussion. And so, but going forward after May 17th, we'll be hammered in, and we'll know exactly what we're doing, and this is how it'll be.
it'll be a
And then
common message,
Right.
you
And then
know.
at that point, we go out, we take that message, and we say, this is what has to be done. It's not a choice anymore. This is it.
Yeah.
This is your option.
And educate on those.
They get to vote.
Educate on those
Yes or no.
particular
Yeah.
points.
Exactly. These really were just for everybody to come and try to figure out what we should do, but, you know.
Well, the takeaway from these 4 meetings is going to be this to me. We have an opportunity to redo our allocation on sales tax and to get the money we need to do the improvement without an additional rate increase. Or we can leave the sales tax just like it is today, and we're going to have a rate increase for the $4 million because that improvement's got to be done. That's not going away. So we can vote it down. The 6.5 sales tax is going to still be there. It's not going away. But it's just like refinancing a house. This isn't doing something to our kids' future. This is the way you do business in America. You borrow money, you refinance, and you redo. I want to add a bedroom on a house. Of course, in this instance, with the health department, we don't have a choice about adding a bedroom on the house. It's got to be done.
You've outgrown your house.
You've outgrown the house. And so we have an opportunity to do this that won't cost the ratepayer any money. I think it's going to help our rate a lot more anyway, from what I've understood of the explanation. And not saying we got to educate the people of what we're trying to do, but we got to educate people of what we're trying to do. But you can't, all of this stuff, the detail of this, if you didn't come to some of these meetings, it's hard for you to, we can't explain this in a general public meeting once it's on the ballot, all the finer details, because it's going to just get
Too confusing.
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
Other than
There's
the best way to
ways
do it.
to really look at this, though. You know, there's all the details, the fine points. You know, the rates and who pays what and where this is all going. There's people that'll understand that, and I'll go, okay, that makes sense to me. And there's the other people that are going to respond more to, okay, who's this going to help? Where's that money going? What's this going to pay for? okay, this is gonna help us, this and this and this, you know, they're gonna see that side of it. And then the other people, you know, the financial people, lawyers, my brother, like we're opposites, you know, he has lots of money and this is why, because he understands all this stuff, you know, but me, I'm the one that's like, okay, who can I help today? You know, who's this gonna help? You know, and that's how you have to look at it. We have to reach those people on those levels, you know?
This is the way I looked at it. Your steering wheel, there's $4 million up here. It has to be spent. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Over here, sales tax. Over here, rates. And it's going to be paid by one or the other. That's all there is to it. I mean, that's got to be done, and you've got two choices. So which line do you want to take? Do you want the rates, or do you want the sales tax? Yeah. And so that's, and I'm like,
and the thing about it is we already have the sales tax.
Right. I know. Yeah, it's not a new sales tax. It's already there. But the rates are not, you know. And so Donna's going to have to be paying, you know, higher water bills.
Well,
you
so
know?
are we.
Yeah, I know. I realize that.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
You know, I don't live in the city, but, you know, I still pay 4 water bills. So anyway, just saying. So I don't get a vote. I just have to pay the water bill.
All right.
So for the ballot, how you want it to read for the May meeting, I understand that it's not going to be allocated. You're not going to say that 50% is going to go to streets, 50% is going to go to general purposes. Do you want the word street to appear on the ballot?
Yes.
Okay.
I think with that,
It'll be unallocated,
they'll have to,
but it'll be
have to
clear
vote
that,
on it, yeah.
yeah.
Well, whatever the way Senator Sarah was talking the other night, anything that you wanted the council to look at in the budget should be spelled out specifically in the half-cent tax. We want street, we want
or if you do general purpose
would do it all.
It sums up.
But she was saying if you want specific stuff, then they would have to allocate money in each of the specific things that was said in this, and that was one of the options. You'd have to have specific things addressed. Still, the council's option of how much they put in street and fire and whatever. I mean, water and sewer is going to be in there because if it happened not to be enough, I don't see ever falling back on the tax. If it does, the economy is going to be worse than I've ever seen it because.
Yeah, for instance, if it says animal control, you'd have to put some
money in animal control.
So I'll leave it as streets in general, but not allocated. The council would have the power to allocate that. But just some has to be used for streets, which is, I know, is the intent.
Right, which we have to anyways, so.
And that was the purpose of like a little preliminary budget to break it down a little bit further.
I'll have that for you. That's not a problem.
You have something in there for tourism or whatever, and I know there's no money and it's going to be difficult and all that good stuff. But if you just put like streets in general, go crazy with that. I mean, they're going to say, well,
Yeah, but they also go crazy over like police. I mean, just how many meetings ago were they like, I don't want any more police officers. I don't want any police officers. You know, which is idiotic. However, that people are like that. You know. So
All right.
if we break down that budget, then there's going to be somebody. Well, I don't want to do that because there's, you know, more money for police in there, and there's more money for.
I will.
At least it's an effort.
That's what you're asking for in the budget is not a problem. I'll do that. I'll have it there. Because the mayor's got to present a preliminary budget anyway. If it was there, I can show you what it's going to be. I can show you what it's going to look like. Because all you got to do is add the numbers to it. I mean, it's not to break down all the categories she's wanting are in there anyway. So it's just put a number to them. So that's not a problem. Anything else you've got? Anything else anybody else has got? I know we haven't had a lot of people here tonight, but I think we had a lot of good discussion. I think hopefully we've got some stuff ironed out that smooths over the doubts. I know me as a mayor, I'm not trying to hide anything from anybody. I'm trying to do what's best for this town and keep the water rates as cheap as we can keep them. But unfortunately as mayor, when you get sent letters that we've been sent, And when I got on here and we did a 20-year master plan of what we wanted to do, what the city water and sewer was going to, water was going to look like, not sewer. This was in there. This isn't new. We were told with growth you're going to have to do these things. I mean, this isn't something that's come up since Billy Plowler got mayor this time. This was this happened in the 4 years I wasn't even on the council or anything. The letter finally came. But I mean, it's not, if anybody had looked at, I've tried to get people don't like to read that book. It's about that thick that tells you the future of the water system. And when Mr. Rice did that 20 years ago, everything he put down, he knew what he was doing. It's right on target.
But with growth, I mean, that's expected, right? I mean,
you'd hope growth is going to come to your town.
Right.
When it grows, you're going to have to expand stuff.
Sure.
It's just part of it. But, all righty. You got any other questions?